The year is 501 after Christ. Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. In the Hippodrome, 50,000 people are watching something that crosses every line of Roman decency. On stage, a young woman, barely 16, is performing what Romans called a pantomime. But this isn't theater. This is something that will be remembered, whispered about, and used against her for the rest of her life. Her name is Theodora, and in 24 years, she will become Empress. But first, she has to survive this. You're in the audience. Around you, aristocrats and commoners alike are watching, laughing, shouting encouragement. What you're witnessing isn't just entertainment. It's a woman destroying her own reputation, permanently and publicly, because she has no other choice. Here's what we know from the historical record. Theodora's father was a bearkeeper for the Green faction at the Hippodrome. When he died, Theodora's mother, desperate to keep the family fed, pushed her 3 daughters into the only profession available to women with no money and no protection: the stage. If you believe that the documented records of history's most terrifying figures must be remembered, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support unearths more accounts from the darkest corners of the human story. Think about what the stage meant for women in 6th century Byzantium. Not respectable theater. The performances were explicitly sexual. Actresses were considered barely better than prostitutes. Actually, they were often the same thing. And Theodora became one of the most notorious. Act 1. The Leda performance. The primary source for Theodora's early life is Procopius, official historian of the Byzantine Empire. He wrote 2 accounts, one public history, praising Empress Theodora, one secret history, the Anecdota, revealing what he claimed was the truth. The Anecdota wasn't published during his lifetime. It was too dangerous. But it survived, and it contains details so explicit that most translations render them in Latin rather than English. Here's what Procopius describes. Theodora's most famous performance was a reenactment of the myth of Leda and the swan. In the myth, Zeus transforms into a swan to seduce Leda. In Theodora's version, performed on the Hippodrome stage in front of thousands, she would lie on stage while handlers released trained geese. The geese had been trained to peck grain from her naked body. Specifically, grain placed on her most intimate areas. Picture what this means. This wasn't a private act in a brothel where anonymity was possible. This was public. Advertised. 50,000 people watching. Her face visible to everyone. In Roman society, reputation was everything, especially for women. Once lost, it could never be recovered. Theodora was making herself permanently unmarriageable to any respectable man. Permanently excluded from decent society. She was 16 years old. Here's what we have to understand. Theodora wasn't doing this for fun. She was doing it to eat. Her father was dead. Her mother had no resources. The stage paid. Nothing else was available. This is what poverty looks like when it meets a society with no safety net. You sell the only thing you have. And in Theodora's case, she sold it as publicly as possible, because that's what drew the biggest crowds and the most money. Procopius claims Theodora performed variations of this act for years. Different myths, different staging, always explicit, always public, always building her reputation as the most scandalous actress in Constantinople. Think about the psychology. Every performance is another nail in the coffin of any hope for a normal life. Every crowd that cheers is another set of witnesses who will remember. Another group who will never let her forget. By age 20, Theodora was famous throughout Constantinople, but famous in the worst possible way. Everyone knew her name, everyone knew what she did, and everyone knew she could never escape it. Act 2. The governor's mistress. Around 521 after Christ, Theodora met Hesepolus, a Syrian official who had been appointed governor of Pentapolis, a region in North Africa. He was older, wealthy, and wanted Theodora as his mistress. She went with him. Here's what you need to understand. This wasn't romance. This was escape. Hispalis offered Theodora a way out of Constantinople, away from the stage, away from the crowds who had watched her most degrading performances. She traveled with him to Pentapolis, modern-day Libya. For maybe a year, possibly two, she lived as the governor's kept woman. Not respected, not married, but at least off the stage. Then Hispalis tired of her, or she displeased him, or maybe he found someone younger. The details are unclear. What's certain is that he threw her out, literally expelled her from the governor's residence. Think about where this leaves Theodora. She's in North Africa, no money, no family, no way home, and her reputation has followed her. Everyone knows who she was, what she did. According to Procopius, Theodora was forced to work her way back to Constantinople through a series of cities, supporting herself the only way she knew how. Alexandria, Antioch, Damascus. At each stop, working in brothels or performing on stage to earn enough to continue the journey. The trip took her approximately 2 years. 2 years of systematic degradation, city by city, climbing back toward Constantinople. But here's what's remarkable. At some point during this journey, something changed. Theodora met Christian holy men in Alexandria. She was exposed to theological debates about the nature of Christ, and apparently, genuinely, she converted. Not the fake conversion of convenience. Something real. By the time Theodora arrived back in Constantinople around 523 after Christ, she had stopped performing, stopped working in brothels. She was living quietly, working as a wool spinner, attending church services. She was trying to become someone new, someone respectable, someone the old Theodora could never have been. And that's when she met Justinian. Act 3. The prince and the actress Justinian was the nephew of Emperor Justin I. He was being groomed to succeed his uncle. He was approximately 40 years old, educated, pious, and legally forbidden from marrying Theodora. Here's why. Roman law, specifically a statute from Emperor Constantine, prohibited senators and high officials from marrying actresses. The reasoning was explicit. Actresses were considered morally polluted, damaged beyond repair, unsuitable for respectable families. Theodora had spent years trying to escape her past, and Roman law said she never could. But Justinian wanted to marry her anyway. According to the sources, he fell genuinely in love. Not just lust, not just fascination with her scandalous history, actual love. Think about what this meant. Justinian was the heir apparent to the Roman Empire. Marrying Theodora would be the biggest scandal in Byzantine politics. Every aristocrat who had watched her perform, every senator who remembered the Leda Act, all of them would be forced to bow to her. The Senate was horrified. They begged Justinian to reconsider, reminded him of the law, pointed out that he could have any respectable woman in the empire. Justinian refused. He went to his uncle, Emperor Justin, and convinced him to repeal the law preventing senators from marrying actresses. Justin, who apparently had his own questionable marriage to a former slave, agreed. In 525 after Christ, the law was changed. Justinian and Theodora were married. Picture the wedding. Theodora, former actress and prostitute, marrying the future emperor in a Christian ceremony. Every aristocrat in Constantinople forced to attend, forced to witness a woman they considered beneath contempt, becoming one of the most powerful people in the empire. Here's what we know about the aristocracy's reaction. They hated it. Procopius records their private conversations, their disgust, their predictions that Justinian was making a catastrophic mistake. But they had to smile, had to bow, had to pretend to honor a woman they had watched perform acts on stage that destroyed any claim to respectability. Think about what Theodora must have felt. Triumph? Vindication? And, the constant fear that it could all be taken away if the wrong people spoke up about what they remembered. Act 4, the Empress 527 after Christ. Emperor Justin Dies. Justinian becomes Emperor Justinian I, and Theodora becomes Augusta, Empress of the Byzantine Empire. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Theodora didn't just become a ceremonial empress. She became Justinian's co-ruler in every meaningful sense. Procopius, despite his hatred of her, confirms this. She attended policy meetings, influenced appointments, received foreign ambassadors. Justinian had coins minted showing both their faces, equal in size. He issued edicts in both their names. Contemporary accounts describe them ruling as a partnership. But Theodora never forgot where she came from, and neither did Constantinople. Procopius records that Theodora was obsessed with controlling information about her past. She allegedly paid informants to track down anyone spreading stories about her stage career. Anyone who publicly mentioned her history faced consequences. There are accounts of former clients or audience members who made the mistake of recognizing the Empress in public, calling out about the old days. They disappeared, not officially executed, just vanished. Think about the psychology. Theodora had achieved the impossible, rose from the absolute bottom of society to the absolute top. But she could never be secure because her past was public knowledge. Thousands of people had witnessed it. Every diplomatic reception, every court ceremony, every time she sat on the throne, she knew some of the people bowing to her remembered seeing her naked on stage with trained geese. How do you rule with that knowledge? By being more ruthless than anyone expects. By making the cost of mentioning the past higher than anyone is willing to pay. If this moment in history doesn't move you to learn more, you might be missing the lesson our ancestors died to teach. Act 5. The Monophysite Heresy. Here's something that reveals Theodora's genuine character beyond the scandal. She was a committed Monophysite Christian. This was a heretical sect that believed Christ had only one nature, divine, not both divine and human, as the Orthodox Church taught. Justinian was Orthodox. The official church was Orthodox. Theodora's beliefs could have gotten her condemned as a heretic, but she used her power as empress to protect Monophysite clergy and believers throughout the empire. She created safe houses in the palace for Monophysite monks fleeing persecution, sponsored Monophysite churches, used her influence to prevent Orthodox bishops from executing heretics. Think about what this tells us. Theodora wasn't just a former prostitute who got lucky. She was intelligent enough to manage complex theological disputes, brave enough to protect her beliefs even when they contradicted her husband's official position, strong enough to carve out her own sphere of influence within the imperial structure. Justinian knew about her Monophysite activities. He allowed them. Their marriage was apparently strong enough that he let her create a parallel religious policy while he maintained orthodox appearances. This wasn't a woman destroyed by her past. This was a woman who had survived her past and built something meaningful, despite it. Act 6. The Nika Riots, January 532, after Christ 2. Constantinople explodes in the worst riots in the city's history. The blue and green factions, normally rivals, united against Justinian. They wanted him overthrown. They set fire to huge sections of the city. The Hagia Sophia burned. The Senate met and proclaimed a new emperor. Justinian's generals told him he had lost control. His advisors begged him to flee the city while he still could. Justinian was ready to run. Ships were prepared at the palace harbor. Treasure was loaded. The Emperor of Rome was about to abandon his capital, and Theodora stopped him. We know what she said because the historian Procopius, despite his hatred of her, recorded her speech. It's one of the most famous moments in Byzantine history. My opinion is that now is a poor time for flight, even though it brings safety, for any man who has seen the light of day will also die. But one who has been an emperor cannot endure to be a fugitive. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We have much money. There is the sea, and yonder are the ships. Yet reflect whether, when you have once escaped to a place of security, you will not prefer death to safety. I agree with an old saying that the purple is a fair winding sheet. Translation: I would rather die as empress than live as a refugee. And if you run, you prove you were never worthy of the throne. Justinian stayed. His general Belisarius crushed the riots. 30,000 rioters were killed in the Hippodrome. Justinian's reign was secured. Here's what this moment reveals. When every man in the palace wanted to flee, the former prostitute from the Hippodrome was the one with the courage to stand. The woman whose father was a bearkeeper saved the Roman Empire. Think about the irony. The aristocrats who despised Theodora's low birth were ready to abandon everything. The woman they considered morally inferior had more courage than all of them combined. Act 7. The laws. Here's something most people don't know about Theodora. She used her power to change laws protecting women in situations like the one she had escaped. Theodora convinced Justinian to pass legislation, closing brothels that held women by debt bondage, prosecuting pimps who forced women into prostitution, providing financial support for former prostitutes trying to leave the trade, increasing penalties for rape, giving women more rights in divorce proceedings. These weren't symbolic gestures. They were systematic legal reforms based on Theodora's understanding of how women were exploited because she had experienced it personally. She also created a convent called metanoia, repentance, specifically for former prostitutes. She funded it from the imperial treasury, provided lifetime support for any woman who wanted to leave prostitution and had nowhere else to go. Some of the women jumped off the convent walls to their deaths rather than stay. Procopius mentions this gleefully, trying to make it sound like Theodora was imprisoning them. But other sources suggest the women who died couldn't handle the transition from their old life. The psychological damage was too severe. Think about what Theodora must have felt, knowing some women would rather die than try to become respectable. She had made that transition, survived it, and was trying to create a path for others. But for some, the past was too heavy. The damage too deep, and no amount of imperial support could heal it. Act 8. The death, June 28, 548, after Christ. Theodora died, probably from cancer, at approximately 48 years old. She had been empress for 21 years. Justinian was devastated. He lived another 17 years but never remarried. He continued to issue laws in both their names even after her death, as if she was still co-ruling from beyond the grave. The aristocracy had waited for this moment. Theodora's death meant they could finally speak freely about her past, condemn her, erase her legacy, but they couldn't, because Theodora had been too effective as empress. Her laws protected too many people. Her courage during the Nika riots had saved too many aristocratic lives. Her influence on Justinian's policy had been too significant. Even Procopius, who wrote the secret history destroying her reputation, also wrote the official history praising her as a model empress. He couldn't fully condemn her, even when he hated her, because her accomplishments were undeniable. Here's what haunts me about Theodora's story. She did everything society said was unforgivable, performed the most degrading acts imaginable in the most public way possible, became exactly what Roman culture said made a woman worthless, and then she became empress, and a good one. The paradox. How do we reconcile this? The woman who performed the Leda act with the woman who stood firm during the Nika riots. The prostitute working her way through Mediterranean brothels with the empress who reformed laws protecting women. Here's what I think the answer is. Theodora was never just one thing. She was forced into degradation by poverty and survived it. She was exploited by a system and then changed that system when she gained power. She experienced the worst of what society could do to women, and used her unlikely position to protect other women from the same fate. This wasn't redemption in some Christian moral sense. This was pragmatic transformation. Theodora understood power because she had experienced powerlessness. She understood exploitation because she had been exploited. And when she got the chance, she used that knowledge. The aristocrats of Constantinople never forgave her for rising above her station. They spent decades after her death spreading stories about her scandalous past, embellishing them, making them worse. But they couldn't erase what she had accomplished. The laws she changed remained. The convent she founded continued operating. The courage she showed during the riots became legendary. You can still see Theodora today. In the Basilica of San Vitale, in Ravenna, Italy, there's a mosaic from 547 after Christ, 1 year before her death. She's depicted as Empress, wearing purple, crowned with jewels, surrounded by attendants. Her face is serene, regal, powerful. There's no hint of her past in the mosaic. The artist created exactly the image Theodora wanted to project. The empress who had always been respectable, who had always belonged on the throne. But beneath that mosaic, beneath the image, was a woman who knew exactly what it felt like to be powerless, who had performed degrading acts for money because the alternative was starvation, who had worked in brothels in half a dozen cities because society offered her no other path, and that knowledge, that experience, made her a better ruler than most people born to power could ever be. The question isn't whether Theodora's past was scandalous. It absolutely was. The question is whether that past disqualified her from achieving greatness. And the historical record is clear. It didn't. Theodora from the Hippodrome became Theodora Augusta. The actress became the Empress. The woman society said was worthless became one of the most significant rulers in Byzantine history. She didn't do it by hiding her past. She couldn't. Too many people knew. She did it by being more intelligent, more courageous, and more determined than everyone who said she didn't belong. The geese of the Leda performance are long gone. The hippodrome where she performed is ruins. The brothels of Alexandria and Antioch are dust. But the mosaic in Ravenna remains. Theodora, eternal in golden-colored glass, staring across 15 centuries with eyes that saw both the absolute bottom and the absolute top of Byzantine society. And she conquered both. If this exposed something you've never heard before, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we're going to keep uncovering the history they tried to erase. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next investigation.